Good morning. I just got off the video, or should I say voice call. We didn't video chat this morning, but we did communicate clearly through the interfaces of messages or voice call. I know there's many different narratives. Please let me get to the point. And please know that all these speakings are coming from Uncle Frank, and they are inspiring me to make this video on something that is not easy for me to talk about. I wanted to speak on behalf of post-traumatic stress disorder and, most of all, sexual abuse as the form of trauma, post representing the past, and also experiencing flashbacks of basically what he calls stepping backwards in our mind to the trauma, to where it happened, so we re-experience it again and again, or that it expresses itself in other ways. He also talks about the 6 deadly sins, or something like that. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, guilt, sin, and blame. It's really hard to stay focused and to keep going where I'd like to go. But my determination to heal myself, and most of all, the whole, I can't stop believing in a greater good, a possibility of communicating clearly and in very small details the intention to stop this from reoccurring. Neglect comes to mind. Neglect is defined as not taking care of something when it can't take care of itself, like you take advantage of it. You neglect it, you deprive it of information or of care. And sometimes neglect can represent unconsciousness, right? Like you're neglecting yourself by not paying attention to these things. I like this quote. If you think I'm a leader, you're setting me up to fail miserably from the idea that you have of me. It's important to find those who love me for me. Instead, they love not you, not me. They love the idea of me, image, facade, the story that they created about me that they want to believe. We are flawed beings, flawed human beings. And we must be mindful not to set ourselves up in vulnerable situations and to constantly tell ourselves that you're not perfect. And not to have that expectation, because our Creator knows that we are flawed beings. Now, I know there's a lot of us who have gone through child abuse, if not everyone. And there are many forms of this, of where we were taken advantage of little kids and things that we just never properly processed that occurred to us that may be still existing in our subconscious. Uncle Frank mentions also how there must be a level of acceptance with everything that has happened to us, what people have done. And he excessively points out how people are sick and how if we start thinking like them, that it'll only make us sick. Like if we start thinking, why did this person do this to me? Did I deserve this? What is going on with this? So next, this comes up for how important it is for us to set our bounds, to set our boundaries, which sometimes we can only find out through personal experience and getting to know ourselves and knowing when this feeling means that or what's going on with this and that. And then there are people who Uncle Frank points out that are willing to cross our boundaries for their own gratification, that they don't care about you, that they just, again, they love the idea of you. Now, with this Epstein stuff going on, and some of you may know about Bohemian Grove, and just all these horrible things, the HEK 293, all the bad things happening to babies, I can admit that my babyhood injuries is what causes a subconscious masculine override protection of the children and the youthful generations of our communities, or planet, should I say. Now, I had this experience, and like multiple experiences, where there was no consent. And just like I had to constantly keep reinforcing my boundaries. Like there are those who have forced kissed me and pushed themselves upon me even though I had repetitively told them no. And then like I had felt excessive guilt because I didn't react in a more violent and aggressive way. And then the confusion is something that's very common in the post-traumatic stress disorder that is known as sexual abuse. There's a level of the little kid that actually feels like guilty, like it's my fault, that like I put myself in a vulnerable situation. I was too passive. Why did I go into shock? Why did I not move? Why did I not stand up for myself when I should have? Another thing that's common in sexual abuse that I've noticed, especially with myself, is that it becomes hyper. Our sexuality becomes more predator, I would say. And let me also say that I read about Mary Magdalene for like the first time last night. And I found out that according to the scriptures, that Mary Magdalene is Jesus' wife, who Magdalene is said to mean prostitute. And I know there's a fine line between the healing of like lovemaking versus like using each other for gratification. And I can see the expression of like my own hypersexuality that has occurred since like I was like a little girl. And there's not really any that I found yet superiorly helpful solutions for healing from these kinds of traumas. I mean, there's multiple forms of it, like where the women get cold and distant. And I think it would be important to also perhaps later on make a video discussing the 7 demons that were casted out of Mary Magdalene, which are like emotional and almost karmic. It's like because she had gone through all these things. I mean, it's so intense. It's so intense when you actually study it, and I just see it happening to like all these women in society, and since it's so common, Like, it seems like the only thing that I'm noticing in amongst those who have opened up to me about their own personal experiences where their boundaries were crossed. And when they didn't even know, and then there was confusion because sometimes they liked it. And then they felt like they were asking for it. I guess you can say I kind of am a little bit obsessed with healing abuse. And this goes for like violent abuse and like psychological abuse, domestic violence. I've seen many forms in my personal experience, and I'm choosing to not attach myself to these negative energies that just keep coming up. Uncle Frank points out this other thing that really kind of gets me going. It's about, like, if you push me, we're going to fight. I'm a pacifist, and if you hit me, I'm going to turn the other cheek. But if you hit me from behind, we're going to fight. A lot of times the people that are going to get you the hardest are the people who's going to work really hard to earn your heart. I've let a lot of people into my life and into my personal experience and business. And a lot of that is traumatically related, of course. Seeking genuine care, love, and compassion. That's kind of been my addiction to healing and coping with what I have been through. And it created like a lot of lack in confidence of that, like, wow, I'm never going to find anyone who's really going to be able to be compassionate and tender to my wounds and actually treat me. Like, there are people, but there a lot of times are conditional. Like, they want me to be their wife and to cook and to clean and like to support them financially, or like to be financially supported by them, but I have to listen to everything that they say, and like this constant domination and submission, which I think is also connected to my interest in the BDSM community. It was a healing outlet for me where I could consensually experience those experiences, but also where I could experience the flip side of what I had encountered, which was the goddess energy. The warrior goddess who was injured and taken advantage of and forced to continue and be even with all these things. You can only begin to imagine how traumatic it really is. And like, again, like, it sucks to be seen as a woman sometimes because it feels like people don't really see me. All they see is what they want to see. They want to basically rape me in their minds. They'll use my personal energy, my image, for what they want. They don't care that I have no interest in being with them. That only makes them want to work harder, to try to manipulate and to own me. I have created multiple stages online in my childhood, starting with MySpace, YouTube, Xanga. I mean, I used to do all kinds of different things as forms of outlets to healing these traumatic wounds that honestly seem like generational curses. Like, I've seen multiple members of my family be like touched by their brothers, or like, you know, their father did some sketchy stuff. And like, I'm very grateful that like I have been saved from certain experiences, but I'm also noticing where the lack of protection and lack of support morally and empathetically that has made me morph into the strong warrior that I am. But at the same time, I don't like that because I would love to have back my innocence. That's why I'm so obsessed with being dedicated to the butterfly and returning to a place where before I was hurt, that I didn't curse and that I wasn't angry and that I didn't reject all people and have superior trust issues. And a lot of people can see my like victimhood Like, I'm very open about it, right? So, like, there are people who are actually still predators. Like, they'll find out this information and then they'll have a will for me to suffer because it makes them feel better by stepping on me. Now, I'll admit that there was times where I was really brainwashed by the material. Where, like, I thought if I just had money, I could have a safe house and then I would be safe. But the truth is, if, like, I don't have safe boundaries, and if I don't have, like, if I'm not, I can't be naive, you know what I mean? Like, I need to have proper moral support. And, like, these are not conspiracies, you feel me? Like, Uncle Frank also says, once proven to be fact, it's no longer a theory. And he was trying to teach me about Lawrence King and the Franklin scandal, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg. But truthfully, like, there's no turning off what I know. Like, once you know, there's no going back. And I'm just doing what Uncle Frank taught me, which is to acknowledge, which means to act upon that knowledge, to apply it. And I can't go backwards. He kept reinforcing how I just can't go backwards. There's nothing I can do about it. And I'm just going to make myself sick if I just keep trying to figure out and re-experiencing my trauma. So I'm not saying that I'm going to become like a psychotherapist for sure. But I am excessively committed to my own personal healing. And there's a lot of things that have been really healing to my experience. Like, there have been times, like, you know, it's hard to do this. But I'm guided by God that it's for the very best to help others. For me not to suffer in vain and in secret and privacy, that I'm to turn to my brothers and my sisters. So I wanted to state very clearly about my venereal disease. And if you don't know what that is, it's also known as an STD. Sexually transmitted disease. And I have before paid for massages since I'm sick and I can't be with somebody. But I've also felt guilty getting massages knowing that I have herpes and that I'm being touched. And then there have been massage therapists who have touched the genital region and where it was consensual. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that they were like going all out and it was like a sexual experience, but like it was really honoring to the body, and like by touching the area of where a injury had occurred, I re-experienced the injury or the emotional aspect of the tissues. And yeah, my shoulders get really tense when I even think about this stuff. And I had been on the massage table and my eyes closed, and I had been kissed before, and I had to reinforce my boundaries with someone who didn't speak English. And I was really conflicted because part of it felt very healing. You know, like before the private parts were touched, like all the other parts of the body were like really good. And then like there were times where like the privates were brushed up against, like gently and lightly and nicely, and just not trying to go in. But I've also had experiences like on consensual basis with professional massage therapists, like in privacy, like where like I was single and there was permission given to like touch closer than others. And with those experiences, I had come to know my body in another way. And like my language isn't making it sound the way that the experience actually was. I would love to go to massage therapy school just to specifically learn these particular points about the body, especially the privates. I know there's a lot of legal laws in our country, in America, but I do know in other countries that like happy endings are very common, and it is like known that the geishas like were more of like healers instead of prostitutes. And there's a particular point that's like on the inner thigh, like I almost say like kind of like the gooch almost, but it's like it's hard to explain, okay? But there's a point in there where a lot of traumatic sexual abuse is like locked in. And for me, that I connect it to is that like I've had intercourse with partners who were like vigorous with me and were like using me as an outlet to heal all of their ways that they didn't receive the love, but then they transferred to me all that angry genetic memory, and therefore it's all like buried in my hips, and there's been transfer of DNA and light or coiled DNA or whatever you want to say, coiled up information. And I know this is like extremely embarrassing and nobody really wants to talk about this stuff. And I know there's so many people that just bury this and just get on with it and just black it out and just act like it doesn't exist. I mean, I have higher interest in learning the psychiatry and the neural pathways that create basically aneurysms in the brain and all the things that we see happen to people who go through post-traumatic stress, especially of excessive violence. And I will mention what, like, not to be sexist, but I'll point out like men are more violent, you know what I mean? Like there's more likely that they'll get beat. I'm not saying that women don't get beat, but I've been beat. I mean, but not super beat like as much as other women. But again, these narrations, they don't really explain my own personal experiences. And I'm not really coming here for a sympathy or like to get anything, you know? It's not a matter of manipulation. And I am determined to not allow my boundaries to be crossed again. And to not allow those who continually show that they don't care about me, that they are willing to cross my boundaries for gratification. Like there's this person who constantly texts me, who's trying to get me to shave my head. He's constantly trying to manipulate me and to push me into doing something that he wants to do to me. Uncle Frank once pointed out as that their kink is to control the Barbie doll. That like, I am what he created. He made me. It's a control manipulation fetish. And there's, like, a lot of that exists in society where people just, like, enjoy being an influencer. And there are even people who are paid, like, to be influencers. Sometimes I even think, like, dang, I wish I was, like, paid to influence people. I'm just paid, like, by private people who think that I'm doing something good, so they send me a $25 donation or whatever they think I'm worth today. My hips are, like, in so much pain. And, like, I want to go to, like, a massage place and get, like, rubbed for hours and hours and hours. But I can't really afford that. And, like, there have been times where it's been completely worth the investment no matter how much it costs. Like, if it was a $200 massage for 2 hours or whatever, you know. Like, there have been times where I've been so desperate that I just, like, invested in that. But then again, like, every time my body is touched, like, even in private lovers, like, I cry, and I have, like, a lot of, like, genetic memory and memories that are locked inside my body. And, like, I had wanted myself to be with one man forever. And, like, yeah, I guess you can say that, like, I kind of went gay, like, in my childhood youth. Because a man had betrayed me, so, like, I had kind of turned more towards the consciousness of being with a woman and being a man for some woman because I was, like, taken advantage of. Like, I can't explain it. I don't really want to explain it, but I know that's important to keep going. I'm very well guided in that, and I'm full of love, and there's, like, a huge opportunity to basically help women Like, I know it's like becoming so common. And then when the women are abused, imagine how they treat their sons and their uncles and all the grandparents. Like, everybody's just being abused back and forth and nobody's talking about it. So I think that, like, my intention of making this is just to make people more comfortable with what happened to them, because also part of my healing process, like, aside from the massage being a instant gratification, is honestly talking to other, quote, survivors. People who were sexually abused, people who, like, have been through what you've been through. And there's also a lot of other things that I do for my own personal healing, like acupuncture and sound healing and crystals and pet therapy. And sometimes it's really nice to connect with energies. And, like, there's a lot of people who are interested in being, like, sexual healers to me, like, that are naturally wanting to make love to me because they know that, like, they have healing for me or I have healing for them. But, like, with my health situation and, like, also, may I say, mental health, and also, like, the desire of being a goddess and actually having every inch kissed and protected, like, I'm sincerely, like, believing that there's still an opportunity for